because trust is so important for us at Tripadvisor, and we're regularly ranked the most trusted travel platform, it's a real key part of our sort of raison d'etre. Then we have a sort of more comprehensive philosophy, really, an ethos, where for any partnership that we run, it needs to genuinely be useful to our travellers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Architects, the InfoSum podcast that spotlights the leaders in the media industry shaping the future of data-driven advertising. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and this week I am joined by Ashley Jones, Principal Client Partner at Tripadvisor. Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Of course, and thank you, Ben, for having me here on the Identity Architects podcast. I'm really pleased to have joined.
I'm super excited to learn more about you. I'm always super excited to learn more about Tripadvisor as someone who uses it on a very regular basis. For anyone who's not familiar, can you just give us a quick introduction to yourself and also to Tripadvisor?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, begin at the beginning, right? So I'm Ashley Jones, and I'm a Principal Client Partner, as you've mentioned, here at Tripadvisor. And so Tripadvisor is by some way the world's largest travel guidance platform. So I'm probably confident that everybody listening knows Tripadvisor from the perspective of an end user. You know, they'll no doubt, like you, Ben, have used us plenty of times in the last 25 years to help research, plan, and execute their travel and lifestyle, both domestically and internationally. But not every single person that we speak to in sort of media and in the industry knows us as a publisher, as an advertising partner as well. So our global reach and sheer ubiquity means that we represent an unparalleled source of highly qualified first-party data that advertisers can access directly through trusted data cleanroom partners like InfoSum, of course, and our enterprise partnership capabilities, which are enabled through our in-house studio Wonderlabs, allow us to bring any idea to life. So my colleagues in the Wonderlabs team usually say, if you can dream it, we can do it.
I love that. And yeah, I feel like the travel industry is such an incredibly interesting place from an advertising perspective. So we can definitely dig into that a little bit more. But we will start with our rapid fire questions to get to know you a little bit better. Starting with, what is your earliest memory of advertising?
Yes. So the earliest memory that I have of advertising was a Reebok TV ad from the year 2000. I just looked it up to check. And at that time, I don't even think I could have actually articulated what I thought an ad was, but I do remember the advert itself as though it was yesterday. So I think for me at that age, I effectively understood an advert as a sort of, very short story, this little self-contained narrative. There's probably something in that. But anyway, it's a Reebok ad, and it was a classic. So there's this jogger running around various urban environments, and he's being closely pursued by a giant disembodied belly. And the ad was called Belly's Gonna Get You. And this big, rather terrifying belly, to be honest, is bouncing along, chasing after this runner. It's very scary for an 8-year-old, which is what I was at the time. And by the end of the TVC, the runners narrowly and really dramatically evaded the belly. I won't spoil it. You can check it out yourself on YouTube. And yeah, really stuck with me. They don't make them with that anymore. That's not a value judgment. Perhaps it's a good thing, but they definitely don't make ads like that any longer.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up because I don't quite remember it. So I'm definitely going to be looking that up on YouTube. Belly's going to get you. Okay, yeah. We'll track that down. Take yourself back to those days being traumatized by a belly trying to chase you. What did you want to be when you were younger?
I actually wanted to be a paleontologist. So you probably know, but it's somebody who discovers and studies fossilized remains of living things. I was particularly interested in dinosaurs. So I had this magazine I used to get, and I had this, encyclopedic knowledge of every possible dinosaur in the whole dinosaur taxonomy. But funnily enough, I can't remember any of that today. It's a shame. It's like a sort of lost language, isn't it? If you don't use it, you lose it, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. There was definitely like a boom in like dinosaur when I was a kid as well. Around like Jurassic Park came out, and then these magazines came out where you could collect like bones from the dinosaur and you'd slowly build up. It was nearly always a T-Rex because that's what all kids wanted. But yeah, so I can totally appreciate that. Well, obviously that didn't unfortunately quite work out. So what was your first job in either advertising or marketing?
Yeah, no, you're quite right. I didn't come to fruition, but no, instead I was very lucky to have my first ads job for Microsoft actually. So it's many years ago now. I took a role for Xbox advertising. So I was a product manager for their then fairly new on-platform ads business. And yeah, I really quickly came to sort of know and love media. And the sales side of the project management really sort of spoke to me. And I went from there, and I've been around since. So yeah.
That's amazing. And as an avid Xbox user, I love that. That's very cool. What do you think it was then that drew you into the advertising industry, and kind of what keeps you in it to this very day?
So being drawn in was just chance, to be totally honest, serendipity, but perhaps you'd say. And I think, like a lot of people starting in media, whether you're a graduate or an apprentice or whatever else route you've taken, I didn't really know what media was. And you kind of learn on the job, don't you, really? So I think, chance is what brought me in, but what's kept me there for coming up to 15 years now is very much the people. I think the technology changes, trends come and go, but working with amazing partners and sort of building amazing partnerships together is what's kept me in the game, as it were. There's people today that I still meet up with and do business with who are from that very first job all that time ago. So it feels like a sort of community, and I do think people tend to stay in it.
Yeah, I agree. I think advertising is one of the most people first and people driven industries. And you say people stick in it, but then also people are very loyal. And it's kind of like a little community of its own in many ways. And you do feel that when you go to kind of industry events and such. You must get to therefore interact with lots of different people at kind of different stages of their career coming into media and advertising. So what advice would you give to someone who's just starting in their career in media and advertising?
So I'd really sort of implore anybody new to media and advertising to say yes and to go to things. So that's my advice. I think the first few years of my media career, I would turn up to anything. I'd turn up to a letter opening, whatever.
Yeah.
There's just so many fun and interesting events that we get the chance to go to in this industry. And you never know what's going to happen, but you might end up learning something. You might meet someone who affects the trajectory of your career, or just turns out to be an amazing mate for the rest of your life. I mean, I'm thinking back now, and I've met future bosses, I've met wedding guests, and I've done some amazing deals that I'm really proud of in fairly random environments that I've just ended up in just by saying yes to something, attending this or going along with someone for that. And I almost see it as it's almost like buying a ticket for some sort of lucky dip. You don't know what you're going to get or even what's possible to get, but more tickets you buy, more chance you've got. And I think, naturally, as you move through your career, you'll focus a bit more on where to spend your time because nobody's got infinite time. But I think, even now I'm a massive believer in just saying yes and going along to things. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It was one of the reasons we kicked off our InfoSummit event series, which you spoke at our latest one. It was that idea of bringing the industry together and the idea that we are kind of a network-driven industry, both for deals, but also for people and different people at their stages of their career. So I think it is super important. So that's great advice. A two-part question. What keeps you awake at night? And then what gets you up and motivated in the morning?
So keeps me awake. I sometimes worry to some extent about some of the big technological and structural changes that we're facing as an industry. I think it would be totally fair to describe media and advertising as volatile sometimes. Change has certainly been a constant since I've been working in this industry. But what gets me up every day and back to it is very much the partnerships I'm working on at any given time. So I love to see them unfold. Always genuinely excited to talk to our partners about how things are going and what we're going to do next. And I think no matter what changes are going on, you've got to just get on with it. And that's always been the way.
Yeah. And that kind of sense of a constant change is definitely a theme that comes up a lot in this podcast, as is the kind of complexity of our industry. So on that note, how would you describe what you do within media and advertising to a 10-year-old?
That's a really good question. I would say I help advertisers reach the world's largest travel and lifestyle audience. And I'll probably leave it at that. Maybe a postscript, often over a long lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always that little bit easier when you have a brand like Tripadvisor that everyone has heard of, used. It does make it that little bit easier to describe what you do.
Yeah, can be.
Yeah. Final of our quickfire questions. If there was a song that was a soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
I listen to a lot of Joni Mitchell. I think she's got all the best lines. Not a specific song, but yeah, it's usually my commute-in playlist.
Nice. That's a great choice. Okay. Let's dig a bit deeper because we do know that there's a huge amount of change going on in the advertising industry. Obviously, travel has also seen a massive shift happening over the last few years. So as we head into the new year, into 2026, what do you think are going to be the biggest consumer behavior trends that will shape the travel industry in 2026?
Yeah, so I feel really qualified to answer this one actually, because referring back to that, wealth of first-party data and consumer travel trends that Tripadvisor has access to, we really are in a brilliant position to map out trends in the industry. So actually, we, as well as everything else that we do, we really position ourselves as thought leaders within this space. So we do produce throughout the year several rounds of free to access research based on that first party data, review data, trend data. So anybody listening can go away and listen and read up on any of these themselves. And I'd really encourage you to do so. I won't actually share any spoilers from forthcoming trends for 2026, because that's the report that's about to be released and everyone's going to be able to see it soon. But there's a couple of key trends from the 2025 Trendcast that really spoke to me, actually, because they represent things that I do when I travel. But I think it's worth putting these two out to give you an example of the kind of insight that we can give. So number one, in 2025, we saw a massive increase in what we're calling second city travel or second destination travel. And so for every sort of trip to Paris, we saw a big increase in trips to places like Lyon. For every London visitor, we saw a big increase in visits to Manchester and Birmingham and places. And the underlying trend that was powering that is that users are becoming ever more savvy about where to go, what to do, customizing and personalizing their trips. So there's a sort of element of kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirts of some of the main destinations. And people are using these new avenues to access data and reviews and plan to go off the beaten track that little bit and really explore those second cities in a way that has really come out in the trend. That's something that I do, and that's why, that one in particular spoke to me. And then a second one that I really like, and again, it sort of reflects me where I am in my life, is we identified a trend that we have termed nostalgia travel. So and this one's rather painful, but as the millennial cohort ages somewhat, some people have families and all sorts of other things. And what we're finding that people are doing is they're often revisiting places that they went when they were young. So maybe seaside towns and other places in which they have special family memories. And it's the type of thing that I found myself doing with my wife over the last couple of years. So it's quite interesting when you see a trend there in the data and then you can really identify with it because it's something you do yourself, actually.
Yeah, that is super interesting. And as some people know, I lived in Calgary, Alberta, Canada for 3 or 4 years in kind of the early noughties. And I have been considering a trip back. So that definitely resonates with me.
There you go then, Ben. It's close to home for you as well.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of what we all try and do from a media industry perspective is around these expectations that consumers have around personalization. And I feel like that's shifting slightly. From your perspective and from the perspective, I guess, of Tripadvisor, what do travelers today expect from platforms like Tripadvisor that they didn't expect from them kind of 5 years ago?
Yeah, great question. I think actually my answer leads onto this rather neatly. So I think it's reflected in trends like this second city trend I just mentioned. Users are no longer satisfied with a sort of the generic trip to a given location. So I think 5 or 10 years ago, there was a sort of given Paris itinerary, for example, wasn't there? Whereas what they expect today is not to be handed that boilerplate itinerary, but instead to have a tailored trip and itinerary that specifically suits their interests, who they're going with, their budget, their sort of predilections and their habits. And it's something that I think is amazing. It's really, really transformed the way that people are travel planning. So, are you a foodie? Do you like your art, culture type stuff, or do you prefer nightlife? All of those types of things being fed into different personalization channels, and people are much more discerning in terms of sort of what they want to do and how they want to customize and personalize those trips. With Tripadvisor, it's really powerful because we've got so much first-party data that can inform those suggestions. And of course, pulling in all the amazing user-generated content we've got in the form of reviews, that we really can come up with some amazing personalized stuff. And it's brilliant to see.
Yeah, that must be interesting as well, because obviously, as we all experience, travelers move across so many different digital and physical touch points when they're traveling or using your service. So how is Tripadvisor helping brands create more of those kind of connected and consistent experiences across that entire travel journey?
Yeah, I think that's a really crucial question. And of course, partnerships like one that we have with InfoSum allow us to meet that in an even more sophisticated way. But the way that we think about the user journey on Tripadvisor is that it's really very comprehensive, actually. So it's not just booking, it's not just research. We really do have that full funnel, the entire travel journey that we talked about. And on average, we know that users spend over 60 hours planning a trip. So it really is a sort of a funnel, as it were. It really is a process. So people will come on right at the top of the funnel, as it were, when they don't have a destination in mind. We call it dreaming. So they might want to just read some editorial content, Traveller's Choice Award, best of the best beaches and restaurants, all that sort of thing. Then they move down to the planning stage. So they'll input their dates, the destination that they're interested in, give us lots of brilliant signals. They'll tick a box saying they're going with their family or solo, whatever else. Of course, they then book, which is behavior that happens on site as well. We've then got a wealth of data on what people are doing once they're in destination, because we have all of their sort of restaurant booking behavior. We have our platform Viator that allows users to book experiences in markets. And then right at the end, they write their reviews and the whole funnel starts again. So we've got that whole journey and data signals at each point to address people. And when we're working with our partners, and often powered by the likes of InfoSum, we can use that first-party data to hit them with the right message at the right time throughout that journey. So one quite interesting consumer behavior that we see, and we've come up with configurations to address this, is that people research really heavily toward the start of the journey. So they're reading up loads of different hotels, restaurants, things to do. There's this kind of work intent part of the travel planning journey. They then book a load of stuff, and quite often they'll then sort of leave it for a couple of weeks and step back from doing so much research. And it's still part of the journey, but they're not necessarily as engaged and focused. And so one thing that we do to keep a brand's messages consistent throughout this period where people have kind of done a bit of research and booking and then just waiting to go is we'll then reach those users off-site. So say you've been really intensely booking for a week or two on Tripadvisor, you've then got a week when your only sort of touch point might be on socials and things like that. We'll then hit those users with that brand messaging saying, don't forget that this brand is going to be part of your travel journey when you're out there as well. Don't forget to sort of do this behavior. And it's really relevant and useful. And it's a bit of a sort of dark spot otherwise that we can address. So quite good. And yeah, as I say, we do have that full funnel, that 60-hour journey.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about TripAdvisor is in many ways, it's one of the first platforms that can recognize intent when it comes to traveling. If I think about my own experience, like I will use TripAdvisor to start researching. I might have 2 or 3 locations in mind, and I'll use it to research different things in those locations, comparing hotels, comparing beaches, comparing restaurants, whilst I'm making that decision. So clearly at that point, I'm showing intent that I'm planning a journey of some sort and trying to make a decision. And obviously that's one of the biggest challenges I think advertisers face is understanding real consumer intent. So what of all those signals that kind of TripAdvisor has access to, what signals of intent do you think TripAdvisor has and sees that the broader industry might kind of overlook?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, of course, you've touched on some of the more basic but very important ones. So, a given person is looking very regularly at a particular city, a second city maybe per our example earlier. So, of course, that's useful data and a first-party signal that we can act on. But as you inferred, some of the somewhat overlooked signals are actually some of the most useful. So perhaps some of these kind of travel adjacent behaviors. So an example off the top of my head is we noticed a big uptick in users researching whether or not hotels have electric vehicle charging facilities over the last few years.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you have an electric vehicle and say you're doing staycation around the UK or somewhere else, it's of the utmost importance that you're able to charge your car overnight so you can go off and do your things. People have range anxiety and other considerations. So that's a sort of adjacent data point that we then ended up building out a big audience from. So we now have a powerful EV charging audience that really arose from a natural behavior on site that we've then been able to turn into a signal. And a similar one that I think is really fun is after the pandemic, we noticed that more and more and more people, when they were dining out and even when they're traveling, were researching whether or not they can bring their pets along. Because I don't know if this is something that you did, Ben, but a lot of people we know bought a lovely pet during the pandemic when they couldn't travel and couldn't go out to eat and drink as much, and now they can. And it's become a really important consideration. So that for us is a data point. We built out a brilliant partnership actually with a pet food brand with whom we built a travel agency for pets effectively. It's a really amazing use case for some of that slightly overlooked signaling that we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, both of those hit home with me because I'm an EV driver and I have 2 dogs. So that was kind of the perfect example. And I think the EV one is interesting, right? Because I think about how other industries could use that data to understand. And even you think about some of these hotel chains and others that might be able to use that data to say, okay, this is now a decision point. We need to consider what we're offering. And so the insight, again, that TripAdvisor can offer to these chains that say, hey, people are looking for this. you should probably offer these kind of like EV charging and kind of pet options. I think that's really interesting from an insight perspective. And obviously all that insight comes from the incredible first party data that Tripadvisor is sitting on. And obviously you collaborate, as we touched on, through a partnership with InfoSum and others, with a wide range of partners. So we think about data collaboration a lot, but we think about it from the perspective of responsible data collaboration. So from your perspective, what does responsible data collaboration look like? And how do you balance that innovation that kind of Tripadvisor can offer based on the data it has with protecting that consumer trust, which is clearly so incredibly important to a brand like Tripadvisor?
Yeah, I mean, it very much is. That's very true. So we work with expert partners like InfoSum who allow us to run cutting-edge data matching and activation and overall collaborations, all within totally safe and privacy compliant environments. So obviously, I mean, it goes without saying that we adhere to all local and relevant regulations and rules. But I think over and above that, because trust is so important for us at Tripadvisor, and we're regularly ranked the most trusted travel platform, it's a real key part of our sort of raison d'etre. Then we have a sort of more comprehensive philosophy, really, an ethos where for any partnership that we run, it needs to genuinely be useful to our travellers and meet a need. And the amazing thing is that there's so many different sort of needs and interests and things that people want to know around their travels and around their travel planning, that there are so many different options to address that. But yeah, just to refer back to those EV and pet care examples, those are super, super helpful for our users. Having partners on site meeting those needs and questions around EV and pets makes our consumers and our users' experiences even better. It's not a sort of annoying thing you have to do on the side to monetize the platform. It enhances the overall point of the platform, and that's how our partnerships work overall. So I think if you have that philosophy running through everything you do, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, and obviously once you have that in place, it allows you to kind of really focus on the innovation. So as we look kind of ahead, what are some of the innovations in travel advertising that you're kind of most excited about right now?
So I think for me, I'm in the process of working on a couple of these, which is why it's front of mind. I would say it's the new suite of AI agents that Tripadvisor has brought to market. So the way that these work is a given brand or a partner can actually build an AI travel planning tool that can feature their brands. So for example, we might do a comprehensive AI agent for a Paris trip. I keep mentioning Paris.
You got it in the mind.
Yeah, maybe I need to get a trip book. But
yeah.
For example, let's say it's a comprehensive AI planning guide to Paris, and a beauty brand could sponsor and own that guide. So it would still be surfacing all the super useful information that users need to plan those trips, but it might also helpfully let them know the best places to buy a given beauty brand that would be a big attraction to come to Paris for, or some other sort of brand relevant information as well. So it's a bit like everything we've discussed, something that's super useful and interesting for our users, but also has loads of brand value as well. And I just think it's cutting edge and really new and cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was inevitable we were going to talk about AI a little bit because obviously it's completely, I assume, and based on my own behavior, I know it to be true, reshaping how travelers are researching, planning, and booking their holidays now. So where, from your perspective, obviously you mentioned the agents innovation. So what is AI already making a noticeable impact on Tripadvisor? And what are kind of the applications that you're most excited about that you think are going to come next?
Yeah, so I think with the agent stuff, I've kind of covered that to an extent, but I think for us, it's really about building an entire suite of tools on site that we have. And what they're actually all doing is simply allowing our users to surface all this data and review content and other user-generated content from forums and elsewhere on site in an even more intuitive and quick and easy way. So it's not actually doing anything that's fundamentally different in terms of the output. It's all about leveraging data and reviews to allow users to plan better. But the actual means of surfacing it is leagues ahead of when people used to have to read everything and do it themselves. It really is fantastic. So I would say building out that suite of tools on site that is allowing people to get to the reviews quicker and easier. And then also we've done a lot to improve our discoverability and the discoverability of our reviews off-site as well. So we've integrated really deeply with all of the main AI platforms, so your OpenAIs, Perplexities, And we're actually receiving an exponentially growing number of referrals back from this platform. So we're making sure that our data is being surfaced in the cleanest, most hygienic way to help people plan when they are using those platforms. And what we're getting in return is lots of referrals back onto the site to continue planning in our ecosystem too. So we've got loads of cool things on site to surface the data, and where people are finding our data through AI off-site, we're making sure that that's coming out in the most clean, user-friendly way and referring back to us too.
Yeah, it is super interesting to think about how kind of, as people use tools like ChatGPT, for example, to research their travel plans, how critical be for those kind of reviews to be positive, right? Because it's gonna directly impact. Whereas in the past, somebody might have Googled something and then landed on TripAdvisor and read up on something. They may get it surfaced directly to them, and so kind of travel isn't unique in this, but the entire industry kind of think about how does your brand appear in these ChatGPT and other AI platforms to ensure people actually have a really positive view of your brand.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the great differentiating point with TripAdvisor's AI suite is that there are no hallucinations that are possible, because with our stuff, it's pulling from our reviews. So it's all pulling from real human data and content that it's trained on. I've heard one or two stories about people, double checking whether they need the relevant ESTA through an AI platform, the relevant visa, being told, no, you're fine, and then rocking up to the airport and saying, oh, but ChatGPT told me, and border control not being very sympathetic. So yeah, we're trying to sort of set ourselves apart a little bit in that way.
And it's so fresh, right? The data is continuously being refreshed because people are on there reviewing hotels, restaurants, and everything in between on a very regular basis. Obviously, when we think about that, travel is one of the most fragmented industries kind of in the ecosystem. So when you think back to kind of collaboration, what does effective collaboration between platforms, airlines, hotels, and tourism boards look like today?
So I would say that it's about understanding that sort of full travel journey that we've talked about, that full 60 hours all the way through from dreaming to planning to doing to writing reviews and starting the whole thing again. And I think, working out where each respective player sits within that, and then actually working together as users move through that journey and funnel. So we're very well positioned to do this because, of course, we work with all sorts of airlines, hotels, tourist boards, DMOs, and we work with brands as well. And it's effectively about getting the right message at the right time in that travel journey to the right users using data, and that's our data, but also where possible, their data as well. And that's how you can get the fullest picture of where someone is in their journey and how to address them.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. And obviously, we talked about just kind of how quickly the advertising industry and obviously travel advertising industry is evolving. So as we look ahead, let's look maybe 2 or 3 years from now, what will separate the brands that win from those that get left behind as the industry moves forward?
So I really do think that more than ever, using first-party data is going to be what enables brands to win, as you say, in the future. So, using your own first-party data, where possible, enhancing it by sharing this with platforms like TripAdvisor, and of course, working with good partners like InfoSum to facilitate that. I think because of this personalization that we've talked about, and that kind of greater need for less of a one-size-fits-all sort of travel ad world, I think that's going to become absolutely crucial to meet what consumers expect hereafter.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then let's look even further. So, 5 years out from now, what do you think will define that kind of next era? I mean, I'm guessing this era is kind of being defined by AI and kind of the rise of that. So what's going to be that next era for travel media?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very difficult one, and you can give me a call in 5 years to see if I get it right. But I actually think that going back to some of the fundamentals of what's important to travelers and the way that people plan, so word of mouth, real user-generated content, real human written reviews, I actually think we might see a bit of a turn back toward that. I think we're already maybe seeing some level of crowding and saturation within the world of AI, and large language models all pulling off endless sources to inform people's travel planning. And I wonder if in 5 years' time people might turn back a little bit to some of the sort of fundamental drivers of recommendations, so reviews, word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because I think, eventually we may already be there. There's going to be a level of saturation with all this stuff, and people go back to the sort of fundamentals, don't they?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this has been fascinating. I do find the travel industry a fascinating place from an advertising perspective. And obviously, that's one of the things this podcast is all about. It's about meeting people who are pioneering new ways to use that data to deliver those better customer experiences. So, when you look to people you admire in the industry, who would you nominate for me to interview in an upcoming episode of Identity Architects?
Well, there are lots of brilliant people to choose from, but today I'd like to nominate Matt Aloob at WPP. He's a great guy with a very interesting profile, and with whom I've done some really effective work recently. I think he has some great answers to all these questions.
Yeah, I love that. And I know WP pretty well at this point. So we could definitely make that happen. Ashley, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. Thank you so much for your partnership, obviously, with InfoSum. You spoke at our event recently, and it's just been an incredibly interesting space to be in. And I'm just really excited to see what Tripadvisor and kind of how the travel industry evolves over the next few years. So thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. I've really enjoyed chatting. Thanks a lot.